Greetings, welcome once again to Pale Blends and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Dez Allenby is an English singer, songwriter, musician based in East Yorkshire. As far as musicianship goes, what has distinguished Dez from his contemporaries is the non-traditional instruments he plays, like bouzoukis, English concertinas, shruti box, harmonicas, and kalimbas whistles. Mr. Allenby was a founding member of psych folk band Forest in the late 60s. After the band released 2 albums and a single, he left the band in 1971. For 30 plus years, Dez has worked with children with special education needs. But he has also continued writing, performing, soloing, as well as collaborating with other artists like Strawberry Moon, Northwood Drift, Three Voices, and in Henry Priestman's Men of a Certain Age. Well, welcome, Dez. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be with you.
Let's go back to the beginning. Where were you born?
Oh, I was born in Grimsby, which is a fishing port in North Lincolnshire, and it was a very important one in those days. And my father was in fact a fisherman, and he went to sea. And when I was born, I was actually being born in Grimsby in a hospital. And my dad was in the hospital in Iceland because he'd been involved in a fishing accident which had broken his hand. So my dad didn't get back home for quite a few weeks until he recovered from this operation. So yeah, that's me. That was Grimsby, which was a nice place to grow up, I think.
Wow, well, how interesting. So your dad was not there for your birth.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, recall some memories of your childhood growing up.
Yeah, okay. We lived in a very nice house. My dad was able to buy a house, which is remarkable because they were not well off by anybody's standards, but he'd saved up money from his fishing trips, and he had a mortgage on a house, and it was a very nice house. It had 2 or 3 bedrooms, one of which got converted to a bathroom while I was growing up in it, and there were just the 3 of us living in this house in Grimsby in Edward Street. And so I was brought up as an only child. But there was a school, Edward Street Primary School, just across the road from where we lived. So there were always children playing in the street. It was a cul-de-sac. So it was very safe to play there. Very few cars in the streets in those days. People rode bicycles, didn't have cars. So I had a lovely childhood growing up in that environment.
Yeah, and of course, everybody probably left their doors unlocked, and you know, windows open and that kind of thing. It was so much a safer time to grow up, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, do you recall, was there any memories of music being played in the household? Do you remember that when you were little? Either.
Yeah, my dad used to listen to music as well as play the harmonica. When he listened to music, he would twiddle around with the radio. I'm looking down to the ground because the radio is at ground level, and he would twiddle around a bit and get some maybe foreign station on somewhere, and he'd get some music he liked, and we'd listen to that for a bit, and then he'd come and twiddle a bit more and we'd hear something else. So I suppose I'd hear a lot of that. My dad would play harmonica. And he played in some army bands in the Second World War, before and after it as well, because he'd been a professional soldier for a time. Yeah, he was pretty good. And he played what we now call first position harmonica. So it really didn't like the blues notes at all, which I particularly love. But he would do that, and he was very good. So he would play that. And my mum had been in choirs before they got married. She'd lived in Lincoln, was in some choirs. I forget what. I won't say what it might be because I might be making it up. But it's she would be in some choirs there, which would sometimes go and sing to the prisoners in Lincoln Prison. So she had a captive audience, as she used to say. But she knew a lot of songs because of that, and she would sing those songs around the house as well. So it was very free and easy. Music was something that people did. But it wasn't structured or anything painful to have to learn or anything like that. It was just, it's a part of living your life, really.
Right, right. I've heard stories of, I think Paul McCartney too is one where everybody kind of gathered around the piano. All the family members and even relatives, have a good sing along and things like that. Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting. Do you think perhaps you inherited your pipes from your mom when she was a good singer?
Yeah, possibly so. It went beyond that because we used to visit my grandparents in Lincoln, and my grandma used to play the piano, in fact, but she was again a sort of busking piano player. She would play for the sisterhood for their hymns that went on there, and she would just kind of bash the hymns out on the piano. And sing along with them. And my auntie, my mother's sister, who really knew about music, said, "She can't play the piano, she makes it up." And I think I got a lot from my grandma. I think she had the right idea, actually. I think she was okay.
So it does run in the family.
Yeah, I think probably so. Yeah.
What about can you recall your first single or album, either someone that bought for you or that you purchased?
Ooh, it would be, I know I had this ridiculous ancient record player, which somebody did buy for me, which was a great wooden thing, and the volume control was by opening doors. I mean, this was really an old 78 player, but it was quite difficult to play much on it. And it's a wind-up thing as well. You'd wind it up at the side. I mean, that was pretty good, wasn't it? So I remember that. First record I remember buying was probably the Incredible String Band's first record. And I started actually buying records before I had anything that I could really play them on, just because I could take them to people's houses and listen to them there. So that was, it was me taking control of the situation rather than somebody saying, "Why don't you listen to this?"
Right. Well, you mentioned the Incredible String Band. What were some other artists or bands that you liked as a teenager?
Oh, there's so many. I used to go to a folk club. It was Grimsby Folk Club regularly. I'd go there. One for weeknights. You'd go there and you hear all sorts of people coming there, because in those days there were some people who have become hugely significant and important, but there were just people go around playing in folk clubs in those days. It wasn't, a very fashionable thing. So I'd see, Ewan McColl and Peggy Seeger, for instance, and you listen to their music. The Watersons from Hull, the Young Tradition eventually from London, Dave and Tony Arthur, all sorts of really good musicians there. And there's a group, the resident group had in it a guy called John Connolly and Bill Meeks, and about another 4 or 5 people playing mandolins and whistles and fiddles around all this. But John Connolly and Bill Meek were both amazing songwriters. John Connolly wrote the very famous song that's been covered so many times, Fiddler's Green. A lot of people think that's an Irish song, and you go to Ireland and they'll say, "Oh, it's a fella around here, it's John Connolly, lives just around the next bay, he wrote that." But no, it wasn't. It was John Connolly in Grimsby, who was a librarian, and he just wrote these amazing songs. So I had a really good folk heritage there. And at the same time, because it was the 1960s, and there's this incredible explosion of music going on in Britain, we went to the local jazz club, which did play some jazz on Sundays. It started as a jazz club, but on Friday nights, transits would rock up there, and all sorts of people came out of these transits to come and play some fabulous, like quality rock music to us. So people like John Mayall came there, and you know, with Eric Clapton, for instance, and you'd be standing in this tiny little club, and there's John Mayall and Eric Clapton within 2 or 3 meters of you, doing their stuff. And they weren't famous. I mean, they were just guys going around playing some music, and we thought it was wonderful. But it just wasn't you know, a famous kind of situation. So I absorbed all of that a lot. I saw Ian Anderson when he was in a group before he was in Jethro Tull. And in those days, he was playing tin whistle, which is lovely, because I played tin whistle. And it was such an eye-opener to think, oh gosh, look, you can actually lead a rock band as a tin whistle player. I mean, it never occurred to me before, but you could, you know, that's what was happening. So that was a pretty good thing. And when I think I read something about Nina Simone years back, about her life in Greenwich Village, and she's describing what went on through the week. And I thought, yeah, I think we had a bit of that in Grimsby, which sounds truly remarkable, but I think we really did.
You had your own scene there. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
That's always fascinating to me to hear, you know, like you talked about John Mayall and Eric Clapton before they were big, you know, to see them in their genesis, you know, as they were just developing, you know, those must be some interesting memories.
Yeah, I think it spoiled me for, you know, for going to big concerts and all that kind of thing. And you get another rock band comes along and think, well, I've heard the best, I think, really. So it was difficult to get into that kind of music in such a big way later on in life, because I'd actually seen, like, I saw Little Richard too, for heaven's sake, when I was about 14, who came to Grimsby with his band from the States. You know, they're all there, and I think he was in the gold lame suit, and maybe they were in pink lame or something like that. And they did a set there. We went to see the Searchers, and we'd heard a bit about Little Richard. Oh wow, what a show that was. And that was in Grimsby, and you know, I trucked along there and saw that. It was a pretty good musical childhood, I can tell you.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I wanted to hold this up. I brought this with me from home so you could, what you were talking about earlier.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, the Watersons. How awesome. Yeah, yeah.
With Martin Carthy. You know, I've always been into his music, his solo material as well. So,
yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, and the Watersons, I mean, they were so important to us, because I was reading something, someone described it the other day about this, but it was almost like it was electric music, because they had such full voices, and they just fill a room, fill a folk club with their sound. No PA, you just stand there and you just make this amazing sound. And that was pretty cool. So we, you know, really, we thought, yeah, we'd like to have a shot at that as well. And that's the kind of music we did early on.
There's nothing like the human voice, you know.
No, that's right.
I think it's the finest instrument, you know, and it's hard to duplicate that. Well, what was your, were you in any band prior to Foresters of Salesby?
Yeah, but not kind of important ones you'd expect really by comparison, you know. So, I mean, we're still at school, you see, in those days. So we're talking about school bands here. There's a kind of school folk club, and we'd get things organised for that. So I was in a band called the Ranting Lads, which was pretty good in many ways. My friend Rory Gregg, who is a sort of ardent Scot, was really the leader of that one, and he was really rooted in the folk tradition through his own family, and through a guy called Dr. John Fahey, who was the kind of dominant folk music person at the scene in those days, as well. There was a GP doctor, and so Rory picked this up. So Rory put us on to doing the kind of things that you might do if you were youngsters at that time. And so we did, whatever we did, can I remember a single song? I don't know. All for Me Grog and these kind of things. And Rory played banjo, which I was reminded the other day, it was extremely loud, maybe too loud. He would do that. So he was there. And indeed, Martin joined that group at some point. And there was Andy somebody and Kendrick Tompkins, I think, was in that as well. So we did a few gigs, and it was so easy. If you knew a little bit about folk music, it was astonishing in those days because other people didn't. And there was folk music in the charts, courtesy of people like Bob Dylan. And somebody knows about it. Well, if you can come and do a bit of folk music, it was very hip, and people can't quite understand that these days, about just how hip it was doing this kind of music. So you could get gigs. It's a bit like, I suppose, when rap came out, there'd be people who could do a bit of rap. I mean, they'd be, oh yeah, come and do a bit of rap for us. And so it was very easy to get to play to people, and we did that. So that was interesting. So yeah, I think that was the only major thing I'd been involved in prior to Forest. It probably was, yeah.
Well, originally you were called Foresters of Walesby.
Yes.
And Martin and Adrian brothers. What were their influences? What did they bring to the table?
Oh, lots. They're both superb guitar players. They seem to think they weren't, but trust me, they were, and they were compared with other people. They're the sort of, this is why we're still at school, probably 15, 16 at this time. And they could actually cover Beatles songs. And they could, one would play the bass part and one would play the rhythm part, and so they just the bass part might just do a bit of lead, and they'd work through like that, and then they'd sing in these absolutely beautiful harmonies with these sort of sibling voices, as you hear on the Forest records. I mean, it's superb. So they brought an absolutely huge amount. They come from a family that used to sing together. They had an older brother who got them into rock from a tender age, and that would be, what would rock be in those days? Heaven knows, 50s rock. And they had a couple of older sisters who also used to sing as well. And the family would apparently go off in the car and all sing together. They'd do this kind of thing. So harmonies were, just like a part of their life, and it's all very natural to them. And I think Adrian must have had some violin lessons at some point, or maybe he just picked it up because he could. But I think he might have had a little bit of music like that. So they were into all that rock thing. Oh yeah, and it's Barbara, one of their sisters, who actually she was into some of the folk stuff beyond the Beatles and such. So she was listening to Paul Simon and Peter, Paul and Mary. So they got a good sense of all that. And Bert Jansch, of course, as well. And I mean, for heaven's sake, Martin could just sit there and play Angie, Bert Jansch's Angie, when, well, a lot of us can't. They were very good and still are.
Yeah, I love his finger playing style too, and as well. So you when you played live early on, you did the 3-part harmony covers of a lot of traditional folk songs, like The Blacksmith, one that I really like. Why were none of those ever recorded?
Well, it was hard to record things in those days. You can't just nip into a studio, or indeed sit in your music room, as I am doing at the moment, to record something. It's a real kerfuffle to get that done, and you'd have to have somebody who thought your music was worthy of being recorded on a record label, and that would take some time to do. So that's why they were not recorded. And also, we only did that, I don't know for how long, a couple of years perhaps we would have done that. So it's a shame, really, because they were fairly startling. we never did actually get those recorded. We did. I remember we used to do Bridgewater Fair, and Adrian would just sing oh God, he had this ability, which it always has, to sing a particularly weird note in the harmony. It's got a real, people like, well, guitarists, lots of guitarists, and I've over time become more like it myself. I like to play strange chords to accompany things, but Adrian would do those, add to the chords that were going on and put those in vocally, which is a bit of a gift, really. So there were some wonderful things there. No, we didn't record them. Obviously, a Famine Song is on Full Circle, and that's the kind of thing we did. But the rest of it just wasn't there. It's you've got to put your head back to the lack of technology that was available. I mean, you couldn't just do a video. You had to wait for somebody with resources in big record companies to select you. It's very hard, really.
Right. And back then, can you imagine just thinking about home recording studios? How far that idea must have been, just like, wow.
Oh yeah, it's astonishing. I mean, I record on Bandcamp these days. Bandcamp? No, I record on the other one, whatever it's called. No, what do they call it? It's not Bandcamp. GarageBand. It's got band in the word. Yeah, okay. I record on GarageBand, but on there, very simple recording thing. I don't use all the fanciness of it, but I just use it to put the tracks down. But within that, what have I got? 32 track recording. And by the time we got into AMI Studios, I think they still had 4 track there. And you can put echo on, but in EMI Studios, they'd actually send a track down to an echo chamber, where they'll then record the echo in the echo chamber and bring it back to the control room. And you just can't believe how primitive things were in those days.
Right, exactly. And the more you mixed and remixed, the sound would become less and less, consistent.
Yeah.
That at that time. So we'll talk about the songwriting process traditionally, how that went with the band, with your own material. How did that process go? Yeah.
Well, we started writing our own material because I think we were touched by all that was going on in about 1966, 1967 sort of time. And there was a sudden explosion of kind of, it seemed like psychedelic. It was psychedelic, let's face it. Not only did it seem like it was. So all sorts of bands were doing different things. And it seemed like the world was changing. And you can imagine, I look at things like the Arab Spring, and I think about how people, all of a sudden, the world seems to be alight with people thinking, look, the old order is gone. We're here again. And it's a bit like that in those days. I see it as a very, very similar sort of moment. And rather like the Arab Spring, it just went back to normal afterwards. And a lot of us just went back to normal afterwards as well. But a few of us still hold it in our hearts, really. We think this is really important. So people were being a lot more creative. And we'd certainly been, the folk scene in those days was a very difficult one. It's surprising that people like Paul Simon and Bert Jan should actually been able to do something within it, because a lot of people were just totally into, it's got to be traditional, and if you're English you have to sing English songs, and a lot of people would even push it further and say, and don't play an instrument, because it's that's not our tradition to do that. And we just had to walk away from that, really. And in doing that, we started writing our own material. And I remember we had this idea that if we can do the harmonies that we do, but also play our instruments at the same time, that would be a pretty cool trick. And I suppose over about a year or so, Martin and I went off to Birmingham, to Aston University in Birmingham. And during that time, we were experimenting with things like this in terms of writing. Adrian wasn't writing still at that stage. Things began to happen at that time for us. And it was just trying out new ideas, and there's plenty of really creative things going on in pop music at that time that we could listen to, which kind of led our way a bit, not least, you know, by the Beatles and Stones and people like that.
Of course. Well, what was the first instrument that you picked up, started playing?
It would have been the harmonica, and it was given to me by my father when I was about 7 years old. He gave me one, and I thought, this is fine. And I used to sit under the table in the living room, which I remember had a cloth coming, a silk tablecloth that my dad had, which he brought back from Italy in the Second World War, end of the Second World War. I would sit there and I would play harmonica in first position. I used to play hymns, because another really important part of my musical heritage is that I used to go to some pretty weird sort of chapel and gospel-y places with my mum. And I'd done that all my life, because when my dad was at sea, the years before I was 5, my mum was really big into church and chapel attendance like that. When my dad came back, he was very much an atheist. He didn't really approve of that too much, so that kind of eased off a bit at that time. But when I was there, I mean, I was in there with people would sing. People would sing. Oh man, they would just, you know, give their hearts out. And when I listened to Southern Baptist kind of stuff in the States, you know, I think, yeah, I've been there. I know how it is for people to sing like that. So I think my mum really, you know, got me into a place where I could sing. So that was I don't think I've talked about instruments. So yeah, so that we're talking about instruments, and I was thoroughly wrapped up in that kind of tradition. So when I played mouth organ, I played hymns on it. And that's how I figured out how to do the scale, and where to find different notes on the scale, and to find that there were some notes I wanted to play which I couldn't, because I was playing in that first position. So that was my first thing, and I still play it a lot now, and still feel more natural on mouth organ than anything else. I mean, if I'm at a session somewhere, and I'm more likely to just find the right key for the mouth organ and just play that, because I can just play it very easily without even thinking about it too much.
I was going to ask you later, but I'll ask you now since we're talking about instruments. Do you think that that's the easiest one for you to play, mouth organ, as you said?
Yeah, it is for me, just simply because, I've been, well, what am I now? I'm 73, I've been playing it a few years, haven't I really? And that's why it is just so easy for me to play, I think. Some of the, it is easy. I think I could do more with it, and be more creative with it as well than I can on other instruments. But the other ones, I just need to work a bit harder to get up to that kind of point, really.
Okay, well,
and it's probably whistle. Okay. Sorry,
I was going to say, which instrument is the most difficult for you to play, or was the most difficult?
Yeah, okay, that's a good thought. Concertina's not easy. So I played that for quite a few years to myself before I brought it out anywhere to play it. Yeah, I think that was quite hard. It was all this business. I play an English concertina, so to play the notes, you go left, right, left, right, left, right as you go up the scale, which is very easy for getting harmonies, because it's first, third, and fifth. You can just play 3 notes together and you've got that. But it's a funny thing to have to learn. And having learned that, it turns out to be really useful for the kalimbas that I play, which do the same kind of thing. When the tune's chromatically like that, and also what else? I play tongue drums as well, and they're the same. You start with a deep note here, and you go left, right as you go up it. So it's quite a good technique once you've got it, but it took a bit of finding, really, in many ways.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. All the instruments throughout history that have been created in different ways to play different ones, and like the hammered dulcimer. I always like that sound. And it's basically you need to have a good sense of drumming. It's
Yeah.
what you're doing, but the sound is so unique and different. Yeah. So,
It is.
well,
It is.
well, going back to the band, who was Mark Williams, and how did he become your manager?
Yeah, we met him. I can't really remember how we got to meet Mark Williams, but we were involved in the Birmingham kind of underground scene, and it was a very nascent underground scene. I mean, other characters around there were, Black Sabbath were on it as well, and we used to meet Ozzy Osbourne as our agents, for instance, and it was just a guy who played in a band, and so were we, and we just shared our property together. Strange days like that. Mark Williams seemed to have some presence on that scene, and I think we knew him before we knew John Peel, who used to come to Birmingham to do gigs at Mother's. But I'm not sure. Round about the same time, we met both of them, and we're knocking around with people on that Birmingham scene. And somehow we got introduced there. I think it might have been Mark Williams first. And he was quite interesting because he was kind of on the editorial part of International Times, which sounds like a very illustrious publication. But it kept us all together. It told us where the gigs were, and it told us, all sorts of things about Buddhism and about what kind of drugs were good and this kind of thing. So it was a interesting sort of paper.
Beneficial.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned John Peel. He was a fan early on.
Yeah.
Talk about how instrumental he was in helping promote the band and help you guys along.
He was, really helpful. I was reminded the other day that he actually first saw us at a gig in 1967. I'm pretty sure that's right, where it was at Aston University, when Joe Cocker was topping the bill, and it was in the week when, with a little help from my friends, was just breaking as the #1 single, and we were way down the list. we started this thing, and did our half-hour spots or whatever it was early on in the evening, and nobody listened to us. And John Peel was the DJ, like running the thing as an MC really, and it was really hurt because he thought we were playing some great music. So he started just keeping an eye on us after that time. So that I think that's how we met him. And he used to go to Mother's to do various gigs. There would be Pink Floyd and all sorts of people would be on there, Edgar Broughton, Roy Harper, and John would come and he'd be MC for that. But for some reason, we were quite close to Mother's at our house. He used to stay at our house when he went there. So we had this really easy relationship with John Peel. He'd come and have a night over, and he wrote about this on the sleeve notes of the first record. In fact, about I think how he was surprised by the dog. Well, the dog was surprised by him and decided to shit everywhere, and how he had to wade his way out of a room on one occasion. And so we had a lovely, easy relationship with John.
Yeah, I've heard what just a nice guy he was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. It was a really nice guy. I think he helped us get our agent in London, Black Hill Enterprises. And I think that somehow, it's what came first, what came second, I'm not sure. But that seemed to link to the Harvest label, because Peter Jenner and Andrew King ran the agency, and then also were bigwigs in the Harvest label as well. So it was their groups that got onto the Harvest label in the early days. Quite what came first within all that, I don't know. But John Peel was very much a part of that. And when we came to London, we at one point were kind of just moving around for people's floors, as we such as a amazing life of being a folk musician in those days. You just lived on people's floors. But he would put us up at his house in London as well, his penthouse flat, in fact, which was lovely, and near Regent's Park. So we spent some time there, and that was kind of paying us back for having accommodated him in Birmingham, which was nice.
Well, you mentioned being signed to the Harvest label. Do you think that was a good fit for the band?
Yeah, it must have been. I mean, the records are still available now because they're on Harvest, I think. And it was such a prestigious, it still is a prestigious label to be on. I'm sure that, I mean, we still sell records now. And I'm sure we sell records not necessarily because of us, but because people want to have the complete Harvest collection, So it was good in that sense. And I think the early years with Harvest were, it was absolutely wide open. There were all sorts of strange things on the label, and by the time our second record had come out, they were beginning to really tighten up, and I think they'd figured out that it wasn't the weird little folky bands that were going to make them millions, but it was going to be the your Deep Purples of the world and people like that, and they're investing more heavily in that way. But just for a couple of years, they coincided with the underground movement, and some of the really quirky things that were going on there, which of course is where I feel I belong.
Exactly. Yeah, one I'm reminded of, I have a Harvest sampler, I think a CD, Pete Brown and Pimbleenko, is that right? Pimbleenko? And
oh, it might have been, yeah.
Yeah, and that's some strange material, like you said. Yeah. I think he just passed away not too long ago too, I believe.
Oh, did he? Yeah, I just might have caught that. Yeah, I think I did see that. It was wonderful. We used to see Pete Brown and the Battered Ornaments, and they were a pretty wonderful group. So a little bit like a prototype during the Blockheads, really. So yes. You'd have it was a real proper London band, and he'd be doing his introductions, and members of the band would always sort of chatting away to each other. Yeah. I said, right, come on then. Right, then you get the next song going and work it like that. But he was a very gifted writer. I mean, he co-wrote a lot of the Cream songs, didn't he? With Jack Bruce. So it was an amazing writer.
Yeah, they had some, like you said, some of that nascent scene. There were some very interesting bands on that label. Well, you guys recorded your first album, the self-titled Forest, in '69. Do you remember the recording sessions? How did those go? Yeah.
I remember going into this absolutely vast studio because it was one of VMI's orchestral studios. I can't remember, proper, but real fans will know the names and numbers of these and will tell me what we did because I don't know. But there are a lot of people know more about Forest and me than I know about myself, I can assure you. But they were just big studios, and we were not very old. We were really 18, 19 and 20 at that time, or perhaps we're scarcely grown up, and we weren't really grown up because I think it was 21 when you came up. And so they were in this vast place with a control room, way up, to look down on these orchestras. And we're in there, and they set the mics up, and we do our stuff. And it was quite a weird experience, really. We must have layered a lot of the things. We'd do it and put the vocals on later, at any rate. We probably played all the instruments at the same time, and occasionally someone would say, let's try that with just a guitar and put the mandolin on later, or something like that. So it was a funny place to do things. But the other amazing thing about it was, because it was an orchestral studio and it was EMI, there was this mass of instruments just waiting for someone to pick them up and play them. And in particular, the thing that really knocked us out, and it's all over the record, but it's all the different keyboards that they had there. It's the kind of thing that you could never have yourself. You'd be a Hammond organ, there'd be a wonderful harmonium, a harpsichord, there'd be a grand piano, and you can just say, oh, I think we'll try a bit of that, especially if you're Martin and Adrian, because they were very good at, could just pick up anything and do it. And Adrian, eventually picked up the cello and played it on several tracks, So it's, it was a pretty wonderful experience. Yeah, it was lovely. And we're in there, it's 1969, I think, when we were recording that. Remarkable. Living in Birmingham at the time and having to come down to London for the recording sessions. I don't know how many days we had. I'd like to think we had a week, but I've got a feeling it was only 3 days really recording, and maybe a couple of days doing a bit of mixing at the end of it. And we were really arrogant young pups. I mean, we were dreadful. We thought we knew how it ought to sound. So because we come from that folk tradition, we thought that all the instruments should be of a kind of equal sound, just like our voices would be, right? And that's how it should be. And that adds to a bit of strangeness of the record, because other people would have featured different instruments in different places. I would do these days if I was recording it, but we didn't, so it's got that kind of feel to it. But I was hearing it the other day, realized I might have to say something about it. I mean, it's a really interesting record because there's so much kind of, so much reedy, woodwindy stuff on it, harmonicas, because Adrian plays harmonica as well, and I was playing harmonica. There's whistles, we all played whistles. And then there's all the reedy sounds of the keyboards on there as well. So it's a very woodwindy sort of record, I think, as well as the way I always remember it visually as being a very guitar-y sort of, stringed instruments record.
Yep. Well, yeah, it's, of course, I'm not alone here hearing similarities to the Incredible String Band.
Yeah.
You mentioned them earlier. Yeah, that's very, very similar sounding. But you had your own, sound as well. So, but I'm sure that throughout the years there's been those comparisons. Did you guys play any live gigs? In any memorable ones?
Yeah, we did lots. We hit the folk scene, sort of Les Cousins and the Troubadour, but we also we do amazing sort of rock venues, and I'm trying to think of one in Wardour Street somewhere. We played them. So we'd get booked in. Oh, we played the Lyceum, for heaven's sake. What were we doing in the Lyceum? But we're in the Lyceum, which is a huge venue in London. And we did a lot on the university circuits as well. So that was kind of a staple place for us. And people would be amazed that these people representing the underground would be in their university and playing to them on a Tuesday evening or something like that. So yeah, quite a few gigs like that. Not enough to make us rich and famous, but enough gigs to kind of keep us busy. And radio gigs as well. So we play live gigs in the Paris Theatre, which is BBC's Paris Theatre, and that would be played there and then broadcast live. So they were pretty good gigs. We played with Brian Auger and Oblivion Express there. He was a headline band, and we were the support band for that. And that was absolutely fine. And we became great friends with him. So, that was nice. We played with King Crimson, and you think, oh, come on, man, what were we doing there? I don't know. But, we're just on these. The big festival in Cannon Hill Park in Birmingham, where we played with Spencer Davis Group. And a big one in Parliament Hill Fields. I can't remember who else was on, but there were 10,000 people there as a free festival, and that was a pretty wonderful things. So yeah, we did. We got about a bit. You know, we'd like to have got about more, but we did get about a good bit. You know, it was okay.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. The early King Crimson. Did you have
Yeah.
any stories? Did you get to hobnob any with other band members or anything like that?
No, but
Not really?
no, I mean, no, because we were just little, you know, we'd be in there with, you know, we were just with our acoustic instruments and such. Oh, John Heisman's Colosseum is another one that we played with. You know, it's just amazing. We met John Martin on the road in Swansea, I think it was, on one occasion, which was quite good. It was very good. So that was a lovely evening, and we did kind of, you know, have a nice little time with him.
I'll always enjoy his material.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, moving up to the second album, Full Circle, which came out in 1970. I've read that this was your favorite.
Yeah.
What are your memories surrounding that album?
Yeah, we approached it differently. The songwriting, which you did ask about, I didn't actually answer, but the songwriting on the first one was very much we would all be living in a house, and you get invited to Martin or Adrian's room, or they come to my room because I've got a song I think we ought to do, and you run through it, and then you'd hear it a few times during that evening, but before you let go of it, you're actually adding things to it, trying out things, and you know, in the way that we'd always rehearse folk songs back in Walesby Church, when we just stand and sing unaccompanied. You know, it was that kind of approach, really, all a bit chaotic and anarchic to do that. But for the second record, it was a bit more organized by the person who wrote the song. So the first lot were all credited to Allenby, which meant that we all felt we were contributing to the overall sound, which was the song. In the same way that I think George Harrison should have been, you know, counted as one of the songwriters of a lot of Beatles songs, just because of what his guitar was doing to the song, really, you know. So we had that sort of idea, but we dropped that idea for the second one and thought that it was better to be there as individuals with whatever it was that we wanted to come with, and then there'd be a bit more directing from the person who'd written the song. So I would have parts to play on whistle, for instance, rather than doing my kind of free-form jazzy sort of whistle all over the place, kind of thing. And I think the album is better for it. You know, it was a bit more organised, and I do like it because of that.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of your favorite tracks?
Yeah, on that album. Yeah, I play people Bluebell Dance. If you know, if they don't know about Forest, it's short. It's something else. You know, I mean, I've never heard anything quite like that. I mean, in fact, any of Adrian's songs, I'd play people. I think they're absolutely amazing. And yeah, do I have favorites? I don't know. Please Don't Walk in the Rain. I love that one. I like them all. I really do. Yeah.
Right. That's always a difficult question too.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. To answer. I like them all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well. So you left the band in 1971. Reason or reasons?
Yeah. Well, our record contract had finished, right, and they really weren't going to give us any more recording time, and things have moved on. And I think I was getting to a point, we'd been together, we'd lived together for a long while, from about 1968, Martin and I from 67. And it was just time to do something different with my life, I think, really, at that point. I needed to know what a weekend was, because I had no idea. It was all just we were there, smoking, and it was great. I just needed to go in a slightly different way for a time. So I thought I'd do that. And if I have a disappointment, it's the fact that I thought that Martin and Adrian would just go ahead and be, world famous and, just get on with it, because I recognized they were better musicians than me and better songwriters. And I thought, just go and do it. You're okay. I was feeling, a bit self-conscious about my lack of musical ability as well. And I think rightly, that if I'd really wanted to make a living at being a musician, I should be able to learn things much more quickly than I was able to do, and because I don't read music and I don't have such a good ear that I can just hear something and play it. It takes a few weeks work to get a song up to scratch, and that was just too slow really to be professional. So I thought, no, I think I better move it into the background a bit, and it stayed in the background, but it's always there. But no, that was probably a strategic move on my part, really. I was also fed up with being poor.
Oh yeah, it's the starving musician, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess David Panton replaced you in the band. Is that right?
Yeah. He'd been around for some time, and we did play together at times. So yeah, there's a sense he replaced. He used to have a bed in my room. In fact, I mean, we had opposite sides of the room in there, and he would play with us, and he would play the kind of stuff that you might have heard if you've heard the kind of bootleg, where the Dave Pantons, they were Dave Stubbs with Forrest. We did a lot of those things together as well. It could have been the Gypsies on there, for instance, and they'd be playing his viola and such like. It was absolutely great. So yeah, it kind of replaced. Yeah, it took up space. Yeah, which was where I'd been, and that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you would end up working with David later on. And then, but sadly, he passed 2019, right?
Oh, did he? I didn't know that. Oh dear. Oh no, I didn't know that.
You had been out of touch.
Yeah.
I noticed one of his albums. I think you provided vocals.
Oh, might have done. Yeah.
David.
Yeah. He'll have recorded something that we did live, I think, on that. I think. And he then got into doing a lot of studio work, in fact. And I mean, he was a genius musician in many ways. It was absolutely great. Amazing, just so creative and so interesting. Sorry to hear it pass through. Yeah.
I mean, you can't believe everything you read on the internet, but
no.
I'm pretty sure that's accurate. So go ahead.
No, go on. I'm listening.
Oh no. What did the brothers do after the breakup of Forrest? What did they do? You remember?
It's hard to remember. I know Martin and I played together in a group called Harry Simon and the Arrears, named after our landlord, who was often in arrears. We were in arrears to him anyway. We did a little bit of recording there, and that was a little band that we pulled together in Brixton. Did 2 or 3 gigs, but it was a kind of practice band. So Martin was around. Was he married to Violet O'Reilly, or did they just live together? I think they might have been married. And they had children. So he was around London for a time, and then he set off, and eventually he was living in Glastonbury. Can you imagine Martin Wellham living in Glastonbury? But when we went to see him there on one occasion, here he is rolling up a joint and complaining about the bloody hippies in Glastonbury. That was wonderful. You might need to delete that bit.
No, that's all right. I've heard more racy things.
Yeah, okay.
That's good though. I like stories like that. I think listeners viewers like stories like that too as well. But Glastonbury, lots of festivals there over the years. Yeah, for sure. Well, how did you become involved in teaching?
I trained, and it was by 1972. I was on a course in London at Goldsmiths College, training to be a teacher. I did that for 4 years, and then got a master's degree after that, and then moved back to this part of the world. And it's really weird because having gotten out of London, which I loved, I thought it was absolutely brilliant when I was there, but it was like I just felt so free, and like weights lifted from me when I got back to this slightly more relaxed area around here. So I lived in Barton-on-Humber and taught there for a long while, and I've taught in Hull a lot since then as well. Yeah.
Well, you for as long as you did that, you must have enjoyed that kind of work.
Yeah, I did. I worked with children with a kind of range of special educational needs in a mainstream school. So they were able to hang on in there in the mainstream school, but only just. And I worked with them in a unit within that school. And really, I met some wonderful people. Those were the kids there, and I'm still in touch with a lot of them. I mean, they seek me out on Facebook, and they meet me. They'll come to my gigs sometimes and things like this. It's absolutely lovely, you know, this fabulous relationship. I mean, some of these kids are now 50, you know, in their 50s. It was a really great experience. In fact, I made a lot of friends with the staff as well, but generally the kids were far better than the staff.
Right.
In the school.
well, yeah, I would say so, to have that kind of impact on the children and to see them develop over time, like you said, to be able to look back on that, you know, years later and say, you know, I had a hand in that, you know. That's got to be rewarding. That's got to be.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah. And as I went on through my career and became a kind of senior manager of all these kind of things. But the best times really were the time spent with the kids. And next second best was working with the teachers who were actually working with the kids. And I think I was involved in a big support service with lots of teachers working for me. I was ahead and they were the teachers, and they were doing a fabulous job with the kids. And that was just such a wonderful place to be, you know, to work with those people because they were so good.
Yeah, to have that hands-on. Like that. Yeah, to make that difference in those kids' lives. Yeah. I commend you. I commend you for. I know it took a lot of patience, I'm sure as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And and we certainly had our moments.
Right.
Yeah. But all the time I was doing music, you see, throughout all that as well. So the time I got to Barton, shortly after getting to Barton, where I was teaching, Barton-on-Humber, we got a folk club organised. I mean, things just kind of, you know, fall into my lap in that sort of way. I think I've been there for just over a year. And it was Rick Kemp of Steel Eye Span's former wife who lived there. And she said, do you fancy getting a folk club organised? So I said, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And so we did that. She'd immediately stopped because she wanted it to be a financial concern. And I just didn't see folk clubs like that. So I got involved with some other people, and we ran a folk club there for a year, which was absolutely brilliant. So I'd play there every week, and we'd have, you know, really great guests on, you know, Martin Carthy and Bert Jansch and Nick Jones. Whoa, yeah, wow! Fancy booking Nick Jones. I mean, that was amazing. And others, Johnny Handel. That was a fabulous thing to do. So I'd never really been out of music, even when I left London, because I'd had this like band with friends in London, and I was straight into this. And it just went on like that. By the time it was the 1970s, with I think in 1979, we had Thatcher, you had Reagan. So let's get that in context. well, I was writing writing some protest songs, but also of performing traditional songs which were protest anyway about times gone by and hard times in Old England, and performing those. And by the time you had Pinochet in Chile, then there were a lot of Chileans had left Chile and were living in the whole area. And we were doing benefits there for the left in Chile, and benefits for the ANC in South Africa and such like. And that really kept me going in a, quite a big, in a different way. I mean, I've been radical when I was at university the first time at Aston University. And we did actually occupy in 1968 when people were occupying universities, Sorbonne and all these kind of places being occupied. We occupied the admin block of Aston University. Yes.
There you go. There you go.
So that was my contribution. What did you do in the Great Movement? Yes. So that's what I did with a few other people. But I've been radicalized by that. But you don't get any of that in the music I was doing until probably Thatcher and all that kind of stuff. So and since then I've always made a point of trying to say something positive in songs about what we can do to make things better, right? Understanding just how bad things can be for a lot of people. So that was a different tack from the kind of material I've been writing in Forest. But I must say, on Full Circle, we did actually do the Praetors song, which is about starvation in Ireland. When we have to remember Britain was the richest country in the world, and millions of people starved and had to go to America. Indeed,
right. Immigrate. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was definitely a sad time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Throughout history, those kinds of moments have happened, or years have happened like that. And wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're into roots music.
Yeah.
Have you always been, or through later on in life did you tend to get more into the roots?
No, I think I'd always been into it. I mean, if you count blues music, music from Texas and places. But so it's a very, when I was young, before Forest, before any of that, I was listening to a lot of black music. It was John Lee Hooker and such like. I was getting out the jukebox because I was hanging around with some rockers that I met at the football match, and we used to go to a cafe and listen to this a lot. So I had a particular love of black music, the jazz I could hear. Quite difficult to hear jazz, but I have a real feel for probably New York 50s jazz. Yeah, it just seems, I really seem to, I don't really understand it. I feel I understand it, it seems to gel with me. So I've done all that. It was, I got into Irish music when living in London. We used to, in fact, we saw the Chieftains when they did their first big concert in the Royal Albert Hall, when they really didn't think they'd get many people going there at all. It was a total sellout. And I was sitting next to, it's just full of Irish people, and there's strong men weeping in their beer as the Chieftains were playing their music. That was one of them. And we used to go to Irish pubs in London. So I'm all the time listening outside of this. And then I suppose progressively just finding different world musics to listen to. Which, it has always interested me. Have I gone into it more of late? I wonder. I don't know. I listened to a lot of African music. Just old records that come up. Music of the West Coast of Africa. And then, I just got into all sorts of roots musicians, I think, over the past probably 20 years in particular. Yeah.
What I find fascinating is you go to the roots of a lot of these folk music, real folk music, where it first started in these different countries, how similar it sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a human thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. I think so.
Yeah, I reckon that if I was to go anywhere, and you know, I sometimes test this, but if I could, you know, if I go to Morocco and I just sing a folk song, people recognise that you know, from my tradition resonates with them, you know, as much as theirs resonates with me as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's something in the delivery of it. It's the is it the so upfrontness of it? You, it's kind of undiluted communication that goes on. Doesn't need microphones, amplification, or anything like that. You know, it's music that's there to be performed in any situation. And I think you're right. Yeah, it's a common thread in all that.
It is a common thread, and you don't always have to know the lyrics. You know, I
No.
hear some people complain like, "Oh, I can't get into that song because I don't know what they're saying." Well, you know, for me, I feel the music. I think it's more important to me is to, you know, feel what they're trying to, what's just coming out through the artist in the music, and then that's kind of secondary, you know, as far as I'm concerned. But to each his own, right? Well, we talked about the instruments, the various instruments. Let's move up to Strawberry Moon.
Oh yeah.
And talk a little bit about that, along with Kathy.
Yeah.
Who else is part of that?
So it's Kathy and myself. It's built largely around, it was Jeff Parsons' inspiration to put Strawberry Moon together, and Kelvin Baldwin. So Jeff Parsons has written most of the songs for Strawberry Moon, and Kelvin Baldwin had been a drummer, and they'd worked together in rock bands in the past. And Kelvin switched for Strawberry Moon to cajon, so you've got a kit drummer playing a cajon, which is a pretty good experience, really, because you can really do a lot with it. And Jeff had played astonishing, and still does, play astonishing lead electric guitar, but is a very handy acoustic guitar player as well. As you'll hear on the record, you know, if you listen to Strawberry Moon, you have to. There are other Strawberry Moons. Sometimes they fly in the sky over England, we discover as well. So you know, if you look for it, you want to look for Strawberry Moon, Seeing Stars, which is the album that we made, and that gets you into our Strawberry Moon rather than some other ones. So that's largely Strawberry Moon. And then over the past couple of years, Rosie has joined us as well as Rosie Queenan, and she plays bass and guitar and sings as well. So in fact, sometimes we're all singing together, which is rather nice. That's Strawberry Moon, I guess, really. And so Rosie will lead on songs, Kathy leads on songs, Jeff and I lead on songs. Kelvin doesn't lead on songs, but you can often hear him singing away as his cajon. So it's a very, very nice band. We just love playing together. It just has that great feel.
How do the live gigs, the live shows go?
Oh, they're good. They're good. You sometimes wonder about getting, is the sound being gotten right? But I think people increasingly, we seem to get sound people who really understand what we're about, and we get that. It's fine. There's some tricky things because Jeff will change guitar a lot. I'll change instruments a lot. So I play at least, what do I play? Kalimbas, bouzouki, harmonica, whistle, concertina fairly regularly there. So I'm constantly moving around, shifting things. I have a little thing on my belt, which I plug into for a lot of these things. And then that gets led off into a PA. But it's a different sound every time. And it's a different, it's a bit louder, a bit quieter, or the kalimba will go, give a great strange ring to it out of nowhere. So we've had to learn to handle that a lot, which I think we do. And it's great. It's lovely doing it. Really is. It's fine. But it's kind of come over as a sort of semi-acoustic group, really. It's acoustic with amplification, really. Although it is amplified. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you this: do you still get a little nervous before you perform live?
Well, I'll tell you, I get a little nervous when I'm talking to somebody like you in this circumstance.
Okay.
So yes, I did today. That's, yeah, I really had to calm myself down,
Okay.
get everything ready. And yeah, and that's always the same when I'm going to perform live. So this to me, it's like a gig day. Right. And on a gig day, frankly, I don't really do a lot of other things other than get the gig thought through. I'm just running over bits in my head and making sure that all the electrics are working properly and all this kind of thing. I've got the batteries in my little preamps, and all these things just get checked. And I think that's a kind of nervousness, really.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody to session in the village the other night who was apologising for not speaking when he came in, and I didn't speak to him either because I didn't recognise him, but he recognised me but didn't speak. He said, I just get so wrapped up in myself before I do a performance that I just couldn't talk to you. And my immediate response was, I really understand that because I'm exactly the same. I just kind of, life drains out of me, ready to all come out at the time when it has to,
Okay, so a performance is nothing compared to the nerves you have right now, huh?
Yeah, no, I'm okay now. Having got started, it's just great, isn't it?
Right.
But no, I'll do that. And it is. I mean, it's a tough game. I mean, do you perform yourself?
No.
No. I mean, it's a tough. Don't matter, you are performing now, but it's a really tough gig when you're on your own. And I find it easier with a group because you get it wrong, somebody will cover you. You hope. You imagine that anyway. But when you're on your own, I mean, to actually roll up at a place and to do all your electrics and get yourself sorted out and sit there and know that it's you and whoever happens to be in the audience for an hour, it's a kind of tough gig, I think, really. And some of us just get on with it. I mean, I do it, but I think it was the first 30 years, I reckon, of doing this kind of stuff, my knees used to knock and I would feel really bad. And it's playing with those kids that, in a mainstream school, and these weren't special needs kids; they were just general kids at the school that I used to have this big band with that I used to play. There's 30 of it. I didn't mention this one. Big band's called Amazing Music Unlimited, and we do assemblies as a regular thing. We do a couple of songs and assemblies, and we do our show a couple of times a year as well. But it's playing with this lot, and I would play as one of the 30. I'd be doing my stuff in that. And when I played with these, my nerves just got so much better. It just became a bit like an African band, or everybody's standing there doing their little part, and it was just lovely. So yeah, I think that's improved me. And then recently, through after lockdown, I've come back in a different way as well.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about three voices. Who are the other two voices?
The other two voices, one of them is Graham Langley, who is no longer a voice with it, because he's, I mean, we're all a bit old. I mean, Trevor's late 70s, Graham certainly late 70s, and he feels he can't really tell stories in the way that he wants to anymore. And he was an incredibly gifted person to just stand there and look amazing and just tell a traditional story or some other story, remembering the parts, and it's so convincing. He'd hold something up and he'd be talking about something that's there, and you'd actually see it. I mean, he was an absolutely convincing storyteller, but he can't use words because you can't do it when you're doing that. So and his memory just wasn't so good to really remember the words, and it just realized his storytelling days were finished, and he's doing other kind of work now. But we still call ourselves Three Voices because that's really who we are. I think we've done 35 or something gigs in Barton over the years. We just keep coming back and putting a show on. So that was Graham Langley. Trevor Millam. Oh yeah, Graham was worldwide known as a storyteller. He traveled the world, been to Palestine, all sorts of places, telling stories. Trevor Millam is a poet, and he's published books which have gone worldwide as well. So he's really well known, and there's me with my little connections. But we're all teachers at the same school in Barton. And it's when Graham Langley suddenly woke up me and Trevor and said, "Oh, do you fancy doing a gig?" that Three Voices got started, really. And we said, yeah, all right, then I suppose. We thought we'd do one and we'd give it all we could for the first gig. And we just keep doing them. People keep coming, and it's moved on. So I've got other people now helping us out, the Sue Wilsey and Francis Kelly. And Sherry, can't remember her other name. All sorts of people are in there, and but it's still packaged as Three Voices because people know what it is. And the Three Voices we say, oh well, it's singing, it's poetry, and it's stories. It's those three voices, really.
Yeah, I like the way you guys, captured that, the title as well. And then Northwood Drift is you, Ken, and Phil Friend.
Phil Friend. Phil Friend must be my favorite guitar player, really. I think is such an empathetic guitar player for me to work with. I don't know what he does. We got a little group together with Kathy. It was Phil, Kathy, and myself, and we did some gigs. And I recorded on Phil's solo LP, and I played a couple of bits. I think I played some whistle on that. Can't remember what I played. And Phil has helped us out on things. So on there's a record I've done called We Sail Our Castles, and Phil plays guitar on that one, on both the tracks on that little EP. I think I've got that right, yeah. So he's lovely at that. And occasionally we just get together and play music together, and it's fantastic. I feel like Phil's like my brother, really. It's just so, I think Kathy does as well. So easy to work with Phil. It's really lovely. Yeah. Oh, and he plays on my new album as well. What's it called? In Love of Love and Rebellion. So Phil, I bring him in as a guitarist for a couple of tracks on that as well, and he's superb.
Okay. Well, he's got a great last name, that's for sure.
Yes.
It's maybe hard to live up to.
Oh, I don't know. He really is such a friendly guy. He really is.
There you go.
And yes, I think he does live up to it. And he's such a gentlemanly guy. It's sort of very, it sounds very traditional English in the way that he handles things. But he's very hip as well. It's incredible. But he has it's almost like a posh English way of delivering things, but it's not posh at all. But that's what he does. Lovely man. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you too about Henry Priestman, because I knew him back with the yacht.
Oh yeah, did you? Oh gosh. Oh wow.
Yeah, I followed him back in those days, and really enjoyed that material. The Yachting Type and so many other great songs. But he really branched out from that and just went into different areas. I like what he's done since. We'll talk a little bit about working with him, with Henry.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. I count myself so lucky to be able to work with some astonishing people, really. And Henry is just fabulous. It's all that work with the Christians, because I was a real Christians fan in my case. I think through the talked about the dark days of the 70s, 80s, but they were the Christians knocking out songs that really seemed to mean something. Forgotten Town and things like that. Just wonderful. And I love the sound. And I didn't realize that Henry had actually written most of those songs. And that's really, I was listening to his work. We met when he started doing solo performances. I think we were some of the first people in the audience to see him. And it's Beverley Folk Festival, he was there. And one of our friends, Ashton Wilson, had been to school with Henry, and he wasn't sure whether it was the same Henry Priestman. So he came along to check him out, and yes, it was. So that was rather nice. So we saw him a few times at the clubs in Hull where he used to play, because he was from Hull originally. He grew up just outside of Hull, in fact, before he moved over to Liverpool and to Wales, where he is now. Yeah, we saw a bit of him then. And then crucially, a friend of mine, Andy Dolman, organised a songwriters workshop in the school of which he was head, not far from here, and he invited Henry and some others along, and me. And I played a bit of whistle. We did a song together that Henry had written. So I played a bit of whistle on that, which he thought was so nice. He wanted to play on his record, which was a bit of a treat. So I got to do that, in fact, and became very close to Henry. I mean, we were chatting the other day, for instance, about stuff, and we do a few gigs, not many, but we do a few. And I'm in his backing group in this part of the world, gets to be called Men of a Certain Age. So I'm one of these, along with Peter Robinson, Martin Pearson, and I get to play concertina and whistle in this one. So it's a real pleasure for me to go out and play with these guys, because they are so good. So it's just kind of top-rate music to be doing. So yeah, and yeah, so that's Henry. What I was going to say about Henry, I mean, it's extraordinary what he's done. I mean, he's worked with David Attenborough on music, and it's just incredible, and the people he knows, and I mean, he just never ceases to amaze, and such a modest guy as well.
Yeah, through all of that, yeah, exactly. Well,
yeah.
Did you want to talk a little bit about your latest, most recent release, and plug that in?
Yeah, that'd be nice. I mean, if people want to hear it, here it is. Here we go. It's of love and rebellion, and it is about love, songs of love and songs about rebellion. And I think those of us who have rebellious things to say only do that because we love people and want things to be better. So I'm very proud of this one. I'm always proud of things I do, but this one I think has got some sustainability to it. Play a range of instruments on it, which you don't often hear, like a got a shruti box and things like this. So that gets good press on it, and I play kalimba. Which doesn't half record nicely. So there are lots of things like that, which I'm really pleased about. So it's quite different instrumentation, and it's a real celebration of the way I've gone over the last few years. And the songs are some of them to do directly with lockdown. Some of the love was coming out of that. I mean, can you remember that time when you'd say goodbye to people? In my case, it was mine and Kathy's son going off to university, and we literally didn't know if we were to see him again, because that was the state of things in 2020. It's remarkable to look back on it. I hope to be able to see you again. We just hope this will happen. So yeah, that created a song. But there are other stories in here. There's when I met some travelers, and they told me their stories on two separate occasions, and both kind of finished their stories with a similar rejoinder. And I thought, this is ridiculous, guys writing these stories down. And so that became a song. Songs about, there's one which uses Greta Thunberg's words, because I think they were so important. And there's another rewrite of All Along the Watchtower Revisited in homage to Bob.
Right.
So if you want to hear that, that's available everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hold it up one more time. Just so.
Yeah. Okay. There it is. Any streaming. It's Inside Out, though, isn't it? Is it?
No, no,
Yeah.
it's not. It's right way.
Have you got it right, Robert? It's inside out to me. Okay. Oh, right, that's how it works. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So it's available on all streaming services. And while you're there, there's a couple of other records I've done as well, which I recommend to people.
People go check that.
And don't forget Strawberry Moon, Seeing Stars.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, Des, can you think of anything else you'd like to add in closing?
No, I don't think so. Except I'll just dong my, if I could just dong my drum. I've got this tongue drum.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Which is made in America.
Oh, okay.
Is this thing.
Oh, then it's got to be top quality if it's made.
It is. It's steel.
Yeah.
Etc. And I just love playing that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, harkens back to that African sound. Yeah, the steel drum.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. So I spend as much time as I can playing that, trying to work it into songs. So there's one track on the recent album which has that, and I do a traditional folk song, English folk song, but with that as a backing, and an tempora sort of drony sound that does a lovely little twiddle at the end of it on that. So yeah, all part of the fun.
Right. All righty. Well, I want to thank you again for taking time out and visiting with me and sharing so much. You know, you had to brush a few of those cobwebs out of the attic, didn't you? A little bit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I know, but I will let you know, Des, once I get this edited down and once I post the link, and I'll shoot you the link so you can
do that.
Yeah, post it on your social media.
I will.
Let everybody know. And you have a good rest of the weekend, and let's keep in touch. You know?
Yeah, let's indeed. And thank you very much for inviting me to have a chat with you. And, you're very patient, and thank you. I really appreciate what you've done with this. So thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and I needn't to be nervous at all.
Right. Well, that's what I want it to be. You know, it's about you guys sharing. You know, it's kind of a biography in a way, and I want you guys to talk. And you know, I need to interject from time to time, but basically, it's you guys sharing and recounting, and just talking. So what it's about. So, all right. Well,
that's lovely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and all the best to you, and have a good rest of the weekend yourself. Take good care.
All right.